Hey everyone, it's Jack, and today I'm going to take a look at RisiOS. I think that's how it's pronounced, Risi or R-I-S-I or R-I-C. I'm going to go with Risi. And so RisiOS is based on Fedora, and so that has kind of piqued my attention already. And as far as I can tell, it looks like this is a version of Fedora that's already set up, so you have a good modern experience with the codecs enabled and RPM fusion and all the good stuff already kind of done there for you. So really something I think might be kind of interesting to look at. And so we have the Gnome desktop based on the latest version, and they're using ZSH as the terminal emulator. Excellent. Also, they have web apps available. So if you're kind of familiar with Linux Mint and their web app manager, they have an equivalent here in RisiOS, which I think is kind of cool. Has an optimized design for quick setup for those repositories, so you have them right in there. Risi tweaks, which looks cool. Looks like you can kind of set the color accents and other things in your theming and so forth. And then even a text-based version using a YAML file. So that's really kind of cool. I like all the options here, and it looks really interesting. So I'm going to download this, load it in, and let's explore it. Okay, and here I am. I'm inside the boot up here for RisiOS. And to save you the pain of the install, I already went ahead and installed this off camera. That way we got a fresh install, and this is actually just uses the same installer as Fedora, so it's probably the same thing you've seen a million times before. And so here's our fresh desktop here. And so after the install, we come up with this welcome screen. And so this is where we would kind of finish our setup. So I'm just going to hit start setup here, and I'm just going to be okay with location services and all that. And then here's where you can add some online accounts if you want, but I'm just going to skip all that as well. And so now I'm going to create a user here, and I'm just going to go with the usual and hit next. And let's set a avatar too while we're at it. So let's see what we can do. That kind of looks cool. I like the bike thing there. That works for me. So let's hit next, and now we'll create a password here and then confirm that. And then we should have something after I spell the password right. I think that's where I spelled it wrong. Let's see. Yep, cool. So we're all done. I'm going to just hit start. And now we should be all set up here. And it looks like it's refreshing. So now we're loading in our desktop, and it looks good. Here we have our typical Gnome environment. And I like that I can bring my mouse down there and that just pops up. I'm not real familiar with Gnome. Don't use it all the time. So I don't know if that's an extension or if they just updated Gnome so you could do that. But I like it. So let's hit the get started here. And here it shows where you can set up your third-party repositories like RPM Fusion, which is a must in my book. They're already checked by default, which is cool. Here you can also enable parallel downloads and fastest mirror. So I checked that too because I think that would be kind of cool. And then here we can add some web browsers here. By default, it's using the Gnome web browser, which has gotten a lot better lately. But if you still prefer Firefox or Brave, Chromium or whatever, here's where you can do that. I'm going to select Brave and hit next. And then you can also optimize it for the NVIDIA GPU, which I don't have, or an AMD. And typically I would use an Intel, but since I'm here on a VM, I don't even need that. So I'm good. So let's hit next. And then here's some additional programs we can install too right off the bat. Applications for audio, gaming, graphics. Here's some video editors. Let's see. They got Kden Live, OpenShot, Shotcut, all by default. I like that. And Pitivi even. How cool. Here we got our graphic design. So we got Krita, Inkscape, a lot of the staples that I go with. So for the sake of the demo here, let's do Inkscape and GNU. And it shows us some updates already as well. That's cool. So I'm just going to hit that, authenticate, and then it should just kind of do its thing and set up. And hopefully I didn't break it, which I'm sure I did. So that might take a while. Okay, that took a little bit there, a few minutes, and also giving us a message there. I'm going to hit reboot. The message was regarding a theme install, so we'll restart that, and then we're back to our grub screen here, And this would just take a second, and then we'll have all that out of the way. So I like the fact that we can just kind of do all that right up front, and it has a nice little guide there that just gets you right through it. So I'm going to go ahead and log in, sign in, and we're back to our desktop. Nice. Okay, I like the background too. This just actually has a nice snappy feel to it, and I like the fact that I can just mouse down here and it just pops right up. We got our apps here, and they're looking good. Photo, all the kind of the standard stuff, plus a few extras like the Office. Let's go in our terminal here, and by the way, we got Inkscape, Brave, all the things installed just fine from what I can see there, so that's cool. And then we got Gnome Web. I'm just going to replace that, so I'm going to unpin this. I just right-clicked on that, hit unpin, and then I'm going to just drag the Brave browser down there, because if this was my own setup here, that's probably what I would do personally, because I use Brave a lot. So let's take a look at our terminal here. So I'm going to pop in here and just kind of magnify that up a little bit, and then let's do a sudo dnf install HTOP. And since I don't have anything open yet, let's just kind of get a look at our resource usage here. See how it looks at idle. Typically, it's around 1.2 on Gnome for your memory consumption. So that's kind of what I'm expecting to see, but let's take a look. So I'll just type in HTOP here, launch it. And 1.12, 1.14, that's actually pretty good. Typically, I'm right around 1.2. So a little bit more optimized than I usually see on a Gnome setup. That's pretty impressive. I'm liking that. All right. So I'll just Control-C out of there. And let's see what else we can explore. So far, this is a beautiful looking desktop here. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an install, and I'm going to install Vim here because I want to just kind of fix this default yes. If you notice, N was the default answer, no, when you do an install. And so that's kind of the opposite of all the other distros out there typically. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to do a sudo vim hyphen or /xc /dnf/dnf.conf, and then I'm just going to arrow down here to the bottom, hit my insert, and just kind of, and then we'll type in default yes equals true, and I think I'll capitalize that. So that'll turn on our default yes, so that way when we do an install, it'll default to yes. All I have to do is hit enter. So I'm going to save that real quick, and that'll kind of fix that. That's just something I like to do. It's kind of an optional thing, but I typically like to do that myself. But RisiOS is already set up in the config there with all the other stuff that I would normally add. So that was really the only tweak I had to do to that file, which is pretty impressive. Here's our app menu, and here we got our extensions. So I'm kind of curious to see what extensions are installed here by default. And there's a weather app. Never been a real big fan of the Gnome weather app because unless you live in a really major city, it's probably not going to show up in here. Like if I stick in something like Niceville, it has no clue what I'm talking about. So I don't typically use the weather there on Gnome. And then let's look at our web app. So this is like a web app thing like you have in Linux Mint, and I kind of like this web app utility. I used to use this a few times, and I think this is kind of cool. So here we can go into our store, and we can see all the featured apps here, or some featured apps, and then we got audio, and so it's kind of nice to be able to look through here and find some things like Spotify. That's kind of cool. I would do that. Accessories, development, JS Tutor, Stack Edit, Google Earth. Yeah, I think I might go with that one. And then over here we got games. So we got a lot of online games here that are in the form of a web app. So this is really cool. This is a nice way to take stuff that are online and just kind of package it into a format where it looks like a desktop app like Google Earth. This is probably coming right off of Google Maps. And so I could hit OK there, and then it's going to use the Epiphany engine there, which I think is the Chrome engine. Epiphany browser based. Nice. And I guess that's all I have to do. It doesn't look like I have to hit install. I can just launch it now that I selected it. Cool. So I'm going to do that. I'll just hit that and see what happens. And nothing. Okay. I've never used this app before, so I'm probably missing something obvious, but it all kind of looks okay. And it's going to earth.google.com. Let's hit OK, and let's just see if it kind of showed up in the main menu. So I'm just going to go down here to apps, and there it is. So wow, okay, well, that's really simple. Apparently all you gotta do is select it and you're good to go. I like it, except I don't think it's launching. Oh well. I guess the web apps thing maybe has a little more tweaking to do. Either that or I'm just doing something really dumb and I'm not really getting how to launch that. But it could just be an issue with Google Earth itself too. Just give it another try here. I see it spinning up there in the global menu, but so far nothing's really launching. So that actually might be something that gets fixed in an update. It looks like it failed to launch, so yeah, I guess we'll just kind of write that one off. But it's a good concept anyway. And then if we come over here, here's our utilities. And I always kind of like the utilities that are in the Gnome setup by default. Especially that disk usage analyzer. I think that's kind of cool. Like when you open that up, you can actually see how much space is being used up and used up where. So if I come over here, you can kind of see a circle graph here of all the different areas color-coded on how much is being used and dedicated to what. And this is in our home folder. So it looks like 98% of it is being used in cache. And there's not actually a whole lot on here. And this is a different view you can do. For me, this one is more intuitive, I guess because I can picture a hard drive platter being round. And then we could even look at our main drive as well that has our file system on it, and that would just kind of have it all sorted out as well. And it looks like the user directory is the one that uses the most, but not a whole lot of space taken up here. But that's kind of cool anyway, especially if you're having some issue with something taking up a lot of space. That can be kind of handy. And let's look at our extensions real quick and see what's on here by default. So our extension manager is turned on, and it's got a background logo here. And so if you wanted to, you could put your own watermark in there over the wallpaper. That's kind of cool. Never saw that. Then we got caffeine, dock from dash. Those are all activated by default. And by the way, caffeine will disable the screensaver, and I like that that's disabled by default too. And then Gnome for the shell, and Google Earth, which doesn't work. So here's our Risi tweaks. So this looks kind of interesting too. I'm going to open up my file manager here, which I believe is Gnome files. And here's our styler. And so this should like change our accent colors. And there's green, but that doesn't seem to be changing either. So maybe that doesn't apply to the file manager. Yeah, I tried closing it and opening it there, and still the accent colors are still the same. I mean, I was assuming there that the menu accents would change, but there's our dark theme, and so that went over very nicely. And here we got different styles, and it says some of your apps might need to be restarted for those to take effect. And I don't know, maybe those styles would just kind of show up after a restart or something, but they don't seem to change on the fly there. There's a classic setting, and again, not seeing any changes, at least not dynamically here on the colors. So I'm thinking maybe it either needs a restart or it just doesn't work. The bright side is that's just cosmetic. It's nothing that would be a deal killer for me because I could always find a way around it. And it looks fine just the way it is. But these are our different GTK3 themes too. So if you're using a GTK3 or 4 app like Gnome, like GIMP or something, I think that would probably affect it maybe. So that's our appearance. And let's see if we have better luck with the layout. So here's our top bar settings. And you can set your audio above 100% if you want. There's our clock settings, so these correspond to the clock. I can hit that, and now I can see the date up here, which is cool. And of course, if you click on it, you can see your calendar and so forth. And you can even show seconds on the clock right there. So you could click that and the seconds would pop up, which is nice. And down here, we got our Windows settings. And I'm going to turn off the seconds thing real quick. And here in our Windows settings, in our title bar here, we can like change around our buttons. Like by default, we only have the minimize and the X button. To maximize, you got to double click that. Unless you're a Gnomer, you probably don't know that. They don't make it obvious. So that can kind of be confusing to people. And if you like that maximize button to be there, we can just change our theme right here in the title button layout, and we can select something else. Probably not elementary, because there's pretty much nothing there. One on each side there, an X and a minimize. And there's our elementary default. And then here we got our Mac OS type. So this would be a Mac OS right hand for your buttons. And then Windows. And so if you like a window style, you can change it there too. And that way you can see all three buttons there, your close, maximize, and minimize. But I guess I'll just stay with the default there. And then we got our keyboard mouse. And here we can show extended input sources if we wanted to. And our key binding presets. You can choose from an Emacs if you're more comfortable with that. And then touchpad settings and so forth. And me personally, there's fingers by default. I would probably just kind of keep all those at the default myself personally. So the Risi tweaks, that's kind of nice. I'm liking it. I just kind of wish the themes would kind of update on the fly there. Not quite sure what the deal is there. Probably me missing something again. So back in our terminal. So let's open our Brave browser real quick. I think I'm going to do something a little crazy since I'm in here. I mean, instead of just doing the usual step-throughs of the settings and stuff, let's go a little different. This is using the latest version of Brave, which is based on Chrome 114. And let's go out to a website. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to nixcommunity.github.io/nix installers. Cool. Now you might be asking, why the heck am I going out here? What are you doing, Jack? What's Nix got to do with Fedora? Well, you know, being an Arch user, I like having access to the AUR because it's got gazillions of packages on there where I can just have access to anything and everything. And that's always been one of the things that kept me on Arch. And then came along at one point DistroBox, where you could actually run Arch and access Arch AUR from DistroBox, even if you were in Debian and Fedora and so forth. But now I discovered not too long ago Nix Package Manager. And Nix Package Manager I think is just super cool. Why? Because their repositories have over 80,000+ apps in there. That's, I think, might even be bigger than the AUR. Wow. And so if you have access to the Nix Package Manager, then you have access to all that software that you normally couldn't get just downloading through the Fedora repos, not even RPM Fusion. So I think this is kind of like that next level stuff. And on top of that, the Nix installer, when you install an app on your drive, it kind of puts it in a separate area. In fact, you can even sandbox it in Nix Shell and just try it out first if you're not sure, and then do a permanent install. But either way, you're kind of shielded in the sense that it doesn't theoretically screw up your Fedora install. And of course, out at the Nix OS website, they do have instructions on how to install Nix OS right in your Nix Package Manager, right in your command line. However, if you go that route and follow that, it probably won't work on Fedora because Fedora has the SE Linux activated by default, and so it can be problematic. So what I recommend is coming out here to the GitHub website where we have Nix installers, and this installer just kind of does it all correctly for you. So if you're on Debian or RPM or even on Arch, you can just do the installers and it just does it all for you, and it's really simple. And especially on Fedora, this is really a painless way to do it. I would totally recommend, if you're a Fedora user, to be over here or even OpenSUSE. So this is where I'm at, and I want to be here because that way we can install it right, and hopefully I won't blow this. So here we are, and we got our RPM packages down here. So since I'm on Fedora, I'm just going to click this guy right here for our x86_64. And so I'm going to save that RPM package. And then all I got to do is come up here and click on it and just let it install. And so that'll open up our DNF Dragora, I think is probably what it's in. So I'm going to hit install here and then authenticate. And then it'll install our Nix multi-user script here and just set it up for us properly. Because if you do this manually on Fedora, it's kind of hard. and I'm pretty sure I would have messed it up. So I really love this script here. And it's just about installed, and there we go. So that's all there is to it. Now it's a done deal. We don't even have to mess with services or anything. So now if I come back here in our terminal, what I can do is I can install something. So let's do a sudo, let's say I want to do sudo dnf, which is the regular way, and I want to install popcorn time and authenticate, and I'm just a regular user right now. So when I go in here, it says, there's no such thing as popcorn time. But on Arch, I could get it no problem. What's the deal? Well, now we got a solution. Let's go with nix-env. That means it's going to install it permanently. And I think I got to do something first, because that didn't actually... I got to log out and log back in for this to kick in. So let me just do that real quick. So I'm just going to jump out of here and close these guys. And this, well, let's just log out. And so I'm going to log out, and then we'll log back in. And that should just kind of activate the whole Nix service there. So our package manager is working. Just going to sign in. And then we should see our desktop again. Excellent. Now I think it ought to work. So going to go into our terminal here, just open that up, then we'll remagnify this guy, and then I'm going to come over here. Now let's do our nix that's better, env. So nix -env and then -ia, lowercase I, uppercase A, and then we'll do, let's see, nix pkgs dot popcorn time, and it should be in their repository. And there it is. So now it's installing popcorn time for us. And when I'm on Arch, that's not a big deal because I have access to everything in the world pretty much. But now I do here. Excellent. As long as it worked. I guess we'll find out. That's half the fun of exploring, right? So this is kind of doing its thing. And as you can see, it's installing to nix/store, and then it's giving it an environment or an area where that's going to be occupied. And so it kind of shields us a little bit from Fedora's main area. And I'm not seeing it in the menu. So I'm pretty sure it installed, but it didn't seem to show the icon. So let me just go in here and just type it and see if it launches. Hit enter, and looks like it's working. Nice. Okay, so there we go. We got popcorn time. And so really all I got to do is figure out what happened to the icon there. I might have to log out and back in. I remember Snaps used to do that. It was some kind of issue. And it might be a minor little thing here too, where if I wanted to appear in the menu. So I had to do a restart there because it's loading in the information. That's just a one-time thing. So it looks like popcorn time is working great, but yeah, not seeing an icon anywhere. But there we got our movies. Here we got series. So that's all kind of cool. Nice. Liking that. So that's how easy it is to get an alternative package manager that'll give you access to a gazillion different apps that you would never find on Fedora's, or probably Copper either. Copper, whatever you want to call it. So now I'm going to try doing a symlink here. Let's do a ln-s ls. I'm not sure where that folder is. I'm going to do a listing here. ls/ maybe it's Nix profile or Nix. No, you know what? There's our Nix store folder, but yeah, I think it's right here locally. So I'm going to turn on my hidden files. I hit Control H, and so it's in under .nix profile /share/application. So that's where our popcorn time is. So I'm going to try to do a symlink to that and link it over to our user folder. So I'm going to do ln-s and then tilde / that's for our home folder, .nix-profile /share/applications/star, and then we're going to link that to /user/share/applications. And I should probably get out of the way. So there you go, user share applications. And so I'll just hit enter, and of course, permission denied. I forgot sudo. So let me do sudo, and let's link that, authenticate, and now let's see if it's there. There it is. Wow. So yeah, it looks like symlinking it just kind of did the trick. Nice. Okay, I was thinking I was going to have to restart that. Cool. But going to log out anyway, just to make sure it stays there. And then I'll just hit Control A, or Windows A, Super A, and still there. So happy to see that. nice. So it looks like our Nix package manager is working great. Wahaha. And just make sure it still launches. And it does. Great. Okay, so there you go. We got Popcorn Time installed. And of course, this isn't actually a first look at Nix package manager, but I just had to bring that in there. And since I installed it, I might as well just give you a quick 101 here on the shell too. So if I go in here and I type in Nix-shell space and then -p, and then let's do Hypnotics. Let's install that. What this will do is this will install Hypnotics to a sandboxed area or the Nix shell. And so this is something that's not permanently put on your drive, but rather is launched from inside the shell. And then that kind of gives it like a sandboxed area. So if you're not sure about an application, you can kind of run it from a sandbox first. And then if you really like it, then you can just use nix-env. And I don't see it in there. I wonder if that's because it's in the shell. Well, let's try to run it here with the command Hypnotics. And there it is. So it is working. Cool. And so this is a IPTV app that you normally would find in Linux Mint. And there's CNN. Let's see if that launches. And not really seeing anything. So maybe CNN doesn't work. How about Portugal? That'd be kind of cool. Give that a minute there. Just a little bit more time. And yeah, it's not doing anything. I think it would have launched by now. Let's try this other one there, CNN Portugal, and see what happens. And yeah, that doesn't seem to be affecting it much either. How about the CNN Prima News? And I guess I picked the wrong thing to pick. But, oh, there we go. Okay, cool. So we got that working. Nice. And I can actually understand what they're saying. I just don't want to tell you what they're saying because then I'd look like a show-off. And if you believe that, I got some swampland for you. But I'm still not, seeing Hypnotics there. So just out of curiosity, I wonder if I have to install it permanently. Like, let's get out of the shell. And I should be able to type it and there's nothing there because we were in the shell. This is sandbox, like I was saying. This is kind of the difference. If I was going to install or just launch Popcorn Time from here, that would work because I use the nix-env. So let's use nix-env and then -ia, nixpkgs.hypnotics, and then we can install it into our permanent area or our main kind of designated part, store. And it's still not there. Fascinating. So yeah, maybe I do have to log out and log back in. So permanent versus shell, I don't think was the issue. I think it's just for some reason I got to log out and back in. So maybe it is a little bit buggy there with the icon thing, or it's just me. But I guess if I logged out and just kind of went back in, I suspect that I'd probably see the icon there in the main menu again. So yeah, it is very familiar. Kind of reminds me of the snap issue that existed a while back where I had to keep logging out and back in to see the new icon after you installed something. So Control A and there it is. I mean Windows A. So Hypnotics and Popcorn Time. So they are there and they do appear. You just got to log out and back in, at least right now. Maybe on a future update there. By the time you even watch this video, it might already be resolved. So yeah, that's the Nix thing. That was me going and doing something crazy. Now let's go to search.nixos.org. And here's where you can just kind of search it visually using your browser. And so this is like the Nix search engine, so to speak. So you can search for packages this way. And this is like a really quick, efficient way to look for stuff. So I really like this too. So like, for example, OBS Studio. Here we can see our OBS Studio and then all these different plugins that are available. So if you click on that, then here we got down here showing what we can type to install that. That would be for the Nix shell. And then for the Nix environment, here we would have on a non-Nix OS, which is what we have right now, because we're in a Fedora distro, we would use this and copy and paste that into the terminal to install it. And then here we got something if you're wanting to set up a Nix OS configuration, which isn't relevant to this. So there you go. I'm thinking this is pretty cool. And if you wanted to find, like a harder to find plugin, like say OBS, maybe background removal, and you would never find this in the Fedora repo, I'm pretty sure. you'd have to go out and build it. But there it is. Nice. OBS Studio, OBS background removal. So that is really cool. And again, all I would have to do is click on this result and then select for our non-NixOS, because we don't have NixOS installed. So we'd want to do this. And I would simply just copy and paste that. And then I would have my background removal plugin. So really makes life easier if you want to do something. And like I said, more than 80,000 packages. And I'm thinking that's probably more than what the AUR has. Or pretty darn close, but I think it's more. So to me, that is just really cool. And that's kind of what I would do if I was going to daily drive RisiOS, which I could actually see myself doing that, because I like the fact that it's already set up the way I like it. So it would save me the trouble of having to kind of set up Fedora to be somewhat civilized, in my opinion. And I really like Fedora. It's actually one of my favorite distros. So that's one thing I find really appealing here. So I just opened up my software center here because I want to kind of look at the repos, what's in here. So we got FlatHub, which is great, and our Brave browser, Copper, and then our Codec repos and RPM Fusion. And it's got RPM Fusion free as well as the non-free already pre-set up. So I like that too. So I don't have to go looking for the free. Sometimes you get the RPM Fusion non-free set up by default and not the free. So in Risi, they kind of covered that, which is nice. Because some apps like VLC and so forth, you need the free to do that. And there's some system updates that are available, but I don't think we really need to do that. So let's just kind of jump out of here. It looks like I put my buttons over there on the left-hand side, so that's kind of Mac-like. By default, I think they're over on the right-hand side for the Risi theme. And let's change our background. I just right-clicked on my desktop, and let's see what kind of wallpapers we got in here. I really like this default, actually. So I'm actually good with that. But let's see what other things. I like that. That actually looks even better. I'm going to click that. Wow. Yeah, that might actually be my pick. Even though I like the default a lot, I think that one might have an edge on it. So yeah, let's go with it. Cool. And then, of course, all our settings here. These are all your usual GNOME settings that you would typically find in Fedora, or pretty much any GNOME desktop setup here. And there's our mouse and touchpad settings. So by default, normally I would just go in here and kind of leave the defaults for the mouse. And here I would kind of want to make sure that everything was good. And yeah, I guess I'd stick with the defaults here too. And then here you can set your default apps. You got your date time settings here. And so if you click that, you can change your time zone and the time format. By default, it's 24-hour format, but you can make it 12 if you like. And then all our info about our system here. So you got a nice look here, and I really like the logo there for RisiOS. They did a great job there for their branding, I think. And then again, our clock, and you can put your weather in there. I like that you can embed the weather, but again, I'm not overly crazy about the GNOME weather app because of its limitations there on the locations. But there are alternatives, actually, if you really wanted a weather app. Like, we could just go out here and, see, I think it's in the software store. We could just go up here and just type in weather here to search. And there's some pretty cool weather apps here. And I think that one just called Weather, this one, is a nice alternative. I think that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, the other ones, I think it's this one. If I click on that one, I think it allows us to put in more obscure locations and not just the major places like Chicago and so forth. So I'm going to install that real quick, and let's just kind of take a quick look at it, just in case you're a weather kind of person like me. Okay, so I'm going to open that up, and we'll just kind of look at the details real quick and see how cool it is. It kind of has a nice looking background there. So let's open that up, and here's our weather. So I'm going to hit continue, and so we got a dynamic and a flat setting. That's kind of cool. Dynamic is default, so let's see what that is. Then let's see if it picks up Niceville in Florida. And there it is. Yes. So kind of cool. I'm going to go with the first option, and wow, the dynamic setting really is dynamic. It's showing the light rain outside, more like drizzle. And so that's kind of coming down, looking good. I like the animations, and by default, the temperature's already in Fahrenheit. Very cool. So beautiful weather app. I kind of like that. That's more my speed there. And then here we got our settings. So we got the Fahrenheit by default here. And then if you go down here, you got our wind speed units and our temperature units, pressure. So if you want to set those to like standard imperial, we could change that to mmHg and our speed units to miles per hour. And then that would like make it totally imperial, I think. So there we go. Nice. And then you can add more locations on there too. So if you want to just kind of scroll through different locations around the country or world, you can do that right in there. Really nice app. I think that is very cool. That's something I would probably have if I was going to stay around in the Gnome environment. So I'm liking that. Even has a moon phase in there. Waxing crescent. Just where I thought it was. Okay, so there we go. The weather app. And again, you can make that flat if you don't like the animations, but I kind of like the animations. That makes it just kind of cool. A little over the top cool, which is my style. So yeah, I think, I'm not going to make this video painfully long. So my 2 cents. I love the way this is set up. RisiOS, I think, is something I would definitely install on any of my computers and not have a problem with it. Had a couple of little funkiness in there, like with the theming. Didn't really get a dynamic updating on the color accents and other aspects of the theming there. Not really quite sure what the deal is there. To me, that's definitely not a deal killer because that's just kind of cosmetic anyway. And if I was really worried about theming or cosmetics, I definitely wouldn't be in Gnome. So I would probably be like putting on the KDE desktop or XFCE or using a window manager or something like that. So to me, nothing that's really going to stop me from wanting to use it. I still think I would probably. And then the other thing, I forgot what the other thing was. Let's see, there was a theming update and the web apps. So the web apps, again, I don't use the web apps that much, so that's not really a deal killer to me either. And maybe that's something that just starts working after an update. So another thing I wouldn't lose much sleep over, of course, if you're fanatical about web app, and this web app thing is something that is available typically in, I think it's Linux Mint. I can't remember, but I think it was Linux Mint or Ubuntu or something. And so to have it available here on RisiOS is really cool. And so I'd like to really see that working too in the future. I love the desktop wallpaper here. That's gorgeous. And it feels really snappy. I was also impressed that when I ran HTOP, it was actually under 1.2. Typically the memory usage is 1.2 gigs, and it's pretty much always at 1.2 in my experience. So to see it under that, showed me that there was some kind of, seemed to be pretty optimized there. I don't know if that was through RisiOS configuration or if Gnome is just getting more streamlined somehow, or who knows. Maybe it was a fluke. But would I use RisiOS? Heck yeah, I would use it. Absolutely, I would install this. And you might want to give this a try yourself. And then, of course, I know I kind of got off track there a little bit with the NixOS thing, but I just couldn't resist putting a Nix package manager on here because I think, for me personally, having the needs to the AUR and I'm having to have access to all the latest software available out there, that is typically the one thing that keeps me away from distros like Debian and Fedora, RPM-based distros that use those type of package managers, because everything's kind of old, and I don't really like old. Now, with Fedora, you don't really have old packages. To me, that's kind of like Fedora is the compromise, because you get newer packages and you get stability as well. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds between Debian and Arch. However, you're still limited compared to Arch, because Arch, you have the AUR and the huge repos in Arch where you can have access to all kinds of software that typically you can't find in a Debian or RPM package manager. And so having access to be able to install a package manager like Nix on Arch and run it and have everything work is awesome. And I can live with the whole icon not showing up until you log back in, because that's a minor thing that I'm sure will be resolved before long. And to me, it's not a real pain in the butt, but definitely would like to see that fixed. I don't know if that's just a quirk with Gnome. If I was on a different desktop like XFCE or KDE, that might not be an issue at all. And of course, if I was running a window manager, like maybe had a desktop Qtile or i3, Hyperlin, if you like Wayland compositors, and I like Hyperlin, personally one of my favorites. So on those, that's not even a thing, really. It probably shows up in your D menu. Actually, that's a good question. I'll have to try that. But anyway, there you go. Enough of my babbling. If you want something new and you really love Fedora, RisiOS might be something you might want to play with. And so load it into a VM or stick it on a machine. And if you're brave, put it on your main machine. Just don't hose it. So with that, I hope this first look and craziness was helpful. And if it was, don't forget to leave that thumbs up and hit subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.